E46 M3s, BMW's return to a special 3 Series M car. Today we're going to go over the car, some of the things you might want to look for if you're in the market for one of these machines. So to me, one of the important aspects when I'm looking at one of these cars is the interior. And I think when you're buying a used car, you always get the interior to be either what you're looking for or better. Some of the stuff on the interior of this car is just absolutely unobtainium right now. It's a unique black headliner, A-pillar covers, which are a little bit problematic on these cars, so pay special attention in those areas. Make sure that what you've got is what you want. Also, when I'm looking at this car, and it's not necessarily an interior component, but it's one of the major decision points, is the transmission. So I'm looking at that shifter, or I'm looking at the paddles if I have an SMG transmission. So starting at the front of the car, of course the thing I see is the headlights, and there are two versions of production of this car. So the earlier model, which has just a halogen light, and gosh, that's the model I have, and every time I drive it at night it's just absolutely terrible. Later on in the production run, we moved to the xenon lights, and so this is a newer production car. And if that matters to you, I love the newer production because of those xenon lights, and you get some pretty cool LED taillights as well. So going under the hood, this is a factory strut brace. This is one of the first cars BMW started putting that in as a factory piece. So that's stock. As I'm looking for generally just a stock car. If you want modifications, that's fine. I generally like a car that hasn't been beat on so much, and maybe I don't always want a super modified car, or it just means if something's modified that I should know more about it and know more about who modified it, what kind of driver they are, and so forth. Of course, just general car stuff. When I look under the hood, I'm looking for is there something with a paint or the anything that would indicate past damage, repair, etc. Now, this is super important. It's not always easy to see rust on these cars, but to me, rust is an absolute will not do it. And I don't want a car that's been rusty. I don't want one that's been driven in salt. And the canary on the mine for rust is these two pieces where the hood latches and some of these front steel engine components. If those things are rusty, you can bet you've got rust problems on this car underneath. Now, we're not looking at it, but when in general inspection, this is a solid lifter motor. It does have shims. Those things need to be adjusted every 50, 60,000 miles or so. So just know that that should be in the records. And then of course on the bottom end of the motor, we talk about these rod bearing problems, which to me, it wasn't really a problem. It's just part of the car and part of the car ownership. Now, that means that if it's been done recently, feel good about it. But just because there was that factory recall done, that doesn't mean you're good. That means it's something to be aware of. It's something you might need to replace in your ownership of the car. You can expand the life of the rod bearings, let the car warm up, use a proper redline oil. We like a 15W50 in these cars, but be aware in your time of ownership, if you're actually going to stack miles on this thing, you might need to replace the rod bearings. So as I walk around this car and look at what makes it an M3, we've got this specific hood. Now this thing is aluminum, so it's going to be pricey if you need to replace it. It has the power bulge in the center. That's one of those differentiators for this car versus some of the other 3 Series of the era. The fender is unique. It has extra space for the tire, a bulge for the tire. It has a grill in the side. The mirrors are unique. The doors kind of standard. The rear quarter panel, if that ever needs to be replaced, has that extra bulge in it. A lot of these parts are currently still available, but just be aware that they're unique, and you can't just put standard 3 Series parts on this M3. And if you want to address issues, and we've seen this happen, address your cosmetic issues, address the issues that are going to require specific parts from BMW early on, because these parts will not sit on the shelf forever. So if you say, I'm going to fix that in 5 years, guess what? You may not have the part, so go ahead and put that in your early plan now if you want to fix something that bothers you. Next, we're going to look under this car, but to get this thing in the air, we're going to use the factory jack points. So let's step down here. I'm going to show you where those are and how to jack this thing up properly or put it on a lift. So when I'm lifting this BMW up, or any kind of E36 or mid-90s newer BMW, I'm looking under here for the factory jack pad, which is a plastic piece that protrudes from the rocker And that's where I want to either put my floor jack, or in this case, my 4 lift arms. There are 4 of these on the car, front and rear. So that's where I've got my arm positioned. I'm going to use a piece of wood up under here just to space it up and make sure I'm grabbing that pad, not the body of the car. And that's what's going to keep you from, pulling on these plastic rocker panels and popping clips on those. And it's just the appropriate way to lift the car. So when I have this E46 M3 up in the air, I mean, I'm looking underneath the car, but we already talked about under the hood where you can see some of those canaries that kind of are the first signs of rust. But while I'm under here, I'm also, since I'm not going to buy a car with rust, looking at some of the other things, the uncoated metal pieces, the exhaust, etc., that might show rust if this car has rust issues. Now, of course, we talked about rod bearings. You'd replace those from below, but everybody's thinking about driveline and what are the expensive things on this car. And honestly, I look at this thing, there's some critical things. There's more than the few we're going to talk about today, but a lot of that stuff is just kind of trivial. So, as I work my way back, so obviously you need to make sure the transmission works, the synchros feel good, or if it's an SMG, that it shifts as smoothly as an SMG would shift. That thing does require a little bit of work with the throttle to make it smooth. But as I kind of go back through here, maybe if there's a clunk in the driveline, that'd be a guibo, or that would be a center support, or maybe the drive shaft itself is an issue. But that's, it's $60 for a guibo, it's 100 and whatever for a center support, maybe $400 or $500 for a drive shaft. That stuff's not a deal ender for me. But when we start getting to the back of the car, I start paying a little bit more attention, because there are a couple of things back here that I want to make sure that are in good condition. So this is a trailing arm rear suspension. We have the trailing arms that go up into pockets. I've got a pry bar with me. I'm going to pry and just make sure that, when I move this arm, that it's not moving too much. So what I'm looking for is bushing movement that's beyond what this bushing should move, beyond the standard for a stock bushing. Now, these rear trailing arm bushings go bad. If any bushing goes bad for an extended period of time and starts allowing that arm to beat the car around, then I have to look further, and I have to look for damage into that trailing arm pockets. Or one of the things on these cars that we know is an issue, I think BMW had a lawsuit on this, is the subframe. And again, this stuff isn't something to be super concerned about. You just have to treat your car right. So if it has bushings that are going bad, you can't just have a clunk forever and ignore it. So again, I'll pry around the subframe. I'll look for excessive movement, and then I'll also pull the carpet up. So we have repair kits for the subframe. So if your subframe was repaired via the BMW warranty, extended warranty, or if you have concerns about it, you'll be able to see that repair kit by lifting up the carpet from inside the trunk, or you'll be able to see signs of welding under here. And again, that's a standard fix. It's not something, I just want to know if it'd been done, or if I've got a subframe on this car that's ultra loose or might have problems. That just tells me that, hey, if I'm going to have to do this job, I need $1,200 in my checking account to cover the work that I'm going to need to do on it. I like these E46 M3s just because I love the car, but I'm aware that there's a value question or a value decision to be made when you're buying one of these things, and the values are going up. As I see E30 M3s that have just kind of gone out of sight to the point that I don't want to touch them, then E36, the next generation newer, those have started to rise. To me, this is the right time to jump on one of these cars, because unlike an E36 M3 with a few different parts, this thing is unique. This thing is special. It's M3 only parts in a bunch of ways, and so to me, now is the time. An average car is about $27,000, but the trajectory is up. So if you want one of these things and you don't want to pay an arm and a leg, it's time to do some looking. So if you're looking for one of these cars, we are a resource as BimmerWorld. Give us a call, whether you're in the purchase stage, whether you just bought one and you need to know what I need to do, what preventative maintenance, how I'm going to fix things, or if you got one now and you just love this thing and want to make it better, do some maintenance, get this thing tip-top shape. BimmerWorld.com, or give us a call on the phone. We'd love to talk to you about one of our favorite cars, an E46 M3.
Support brands that support grassroots motorsports. Get your chemical solutions from CRC Industries. Visit crcindustries.com to learn more.